At this presentation, our speaker will be sharing with us how the transformation of the communication landscape from traditional media to digital media wasn't just a revolution in terms of message delivery. It was an indicator of the profound transformation of audience habits. And how can marketers keep themselves updated on new technologies, methods, and trends so that they don't fall behind in the future? Shahed Amanullah is the global VP of customer experience at Frost & Sullivan. With 20 years of experience in product design and development for both the businesses he started as well as major technology companies, Shahed joined the Frost & Sullivan team in 2020 to help transform the company's digital infrastructure and customer experience. He is focused on implementing the company's long-term growth strategies through its digital platforms and brand messaging. All right, so we are very grateful to have Shahed Amanullah to share his knowledge with us. Without further ado, Shahed will be on air real soon, so please stay tuned and stay caffeinated. Bye.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending Marcom Tech this year. I'm really happy to be with you. My name is Shahed Amanullah. I'm a global vice president at the research firm Frost & Sullivan. I'm also a managing director of a private equity firm called Frost Capital in the San Francisco Bay Area. I have lived and breathed marketing in both the traditional and digital spaces for quite a while now. I have done work with startups. I've done work with major corporations like Google and Facebook. I have done marketing work within institutions like the World Bank. So I've got a pretty broad understanding of where marketing has come from the traditional space to the digital space. Now, of course, I have a bias. My bias is digital media and all that it can do for marketing. I think that we haven't even scratched the surface of what it can do for us. But I also have seen the transition that people have gone from the traditional space to the digital space. So what I wanted to do today, in the time that we have, is I wanted to talk a little bit about the traditional media space with respect to marketing, and compare and contrast it to the digital space. And then talk a little bit about what each one offers and how to make that transition over to the digital space and why it's necessary. It's a very complicated space. People are still trying to figure it out. I think if you're one of the younger people in the audience, you probably get it a little bit more than some of the older people. But either way, we all have to make this transition because this is the way the world is going. So let's go ahead and find out what this is all about. So what will we be covering today? First of all, we'll just define what do we mean by traditional media, because I think people have different ideas of what that means. I actually think that my definition might be a little different than what some of you might think, and let's compare notes. So how does digital media compare to that? So in a world of digital media, the marketing environment has been completely transformed. So we want to compare what worked and what didn't work in traditional media and how that compares to the digital environment. And what's possible with digital media. I think that people are definitely familiar with that environment. They've, of course, seen advertising and social media, and they've seen rich video experiences and things like that. But I think we've only scratched the surface of what's possible. So I wanted to talk a little bit about those experiences. And then, most important, how do you maximize the opportunity? So one of the great things about the digital space is that it gives us opportunities to uncover every little bit of value that we can find, but it requires different strategies to do that in every different space. So we'll talk about that as well. So first, let's talk about traditional media, and let's talk about it from the perspective of the marketer, okay? So the first thing that I want to talk about are the audiences that you go after in traditional media. In general, at least from the perspective of somebody in the digital space, audiences are broad, they're vague, and they're hard to define. What do I mean by this? So say you're putting an ad in a newspaper. Well, what do you know about that audience? Maybe you have something very specific you want to sell, but the demographic of that newspaper is one demographic made up of a lot of different kinds of people, and you're targeting all of them with your ad. The same goes for maybe less so for television ads, where you're putting a commercial on after a particular show, and maybe you know something about the audience of that show, but it's usually a very broad category. Maybe it's 15 to 29-year-olds, or maybe it's a particular region that you're putting the ad in. Maybe it's a local market, but that's really all that it offers. And maybe that's helpful if you are in a general business, maybe you're a store or something like that. But in today's economy, people are being very specific about their products and their services, and that requires us to have very specific audiences to target. And so it's very, very difficult to do that within traditional media. What that translates to is that targeting markets is more of an art than a science. So when you're faced with broad audiences, you try to be creative about the advertising and the marketing channel. For example, you try to use language that appeals to a particular group of people, or you use certain words or phrases that appeals to the type of people you're trying to target. And some people are actually really good at this in traditional media, but it does require this kind of sensibility that you kind of have. You can't define it very clearly, but you've got an idea of how to attract them. And in the old days, of television and radio ads, people did this with catchy jingles, or people did this in magazine ads with, particular types of photography or particular types of animation and graphic design. And, what ties that particular bit of creative to a particular audience? Again, it's more of an art than a science. Now, even if you happen to attract the attention of a customer in traditional media, tracking their journey is pretty much difficult to impossible. How do you know if the customer has come to you because they saw a magazine ad? Or how do you know if they came to you because they saw an ad on TV? Unless you ask them, which doesn't really happen all that often in the purchase journey, it's really hard to figure out if that ad worked, and therefore it's really hard to figure out what your return on investment is. I spent this much money on a particular piece of marketing, and I maybe I sold a lot of different things, but how do you know who came in because of that and who just came in because of other reasons? So it becomes it's very, very, very difficult. And then last, the mediums available for communication are really limited. I've mentioned television, radio, advertising. I'm going to throw another one here in the traditional media camp that maybe some of you might disagree with. I actually think email is so old that it actually falls into the realm of traditional media at this point. Maybe not completely traditional, and maybe it's kind of straddles the line between traditional and digital media, and modern digital media, but it kind of has qualities of both. So, even though it's technically digital, it actually has a lot of the same problems, at least in the actual text of the email and the way that the email is formulated. It actually borrows a lot from traditional media in terms of the way it's formulated. Now let's take a look at the customer perspective of traditional media. So if you're in a traditional media environment, how do the customers look at you? So first of all, there's actually a high risk that a customer might have a bad experience. What do I mean by this? I mean that when you take an ad and you put it out to the general audience and you only want a few people to resonate with it, it means that the remaining people for whom that ad is not relevant are forced to either sit through it, maybe they're sitting through an ad on TV, or they're forced to look at it. And if they're not your direct customer, or they're not, possibly on a customer journey to engage with you, then you're wasting their time. And it leaves a sour taste in their mouth if it's just not something that's going to resonate with them. It's kind of getting in the way of their enjoyment of the media that they're reading. What this means is that it's also easier for the customer to avoid and tune out. How many people will take restroom breaks during a commercial on television, or how many people will scan the newspaper and skip right over the ads? or listening to the radio. They'll just kind of tune it out. And people have become really good at this, actually, in the traditional space, which of course means to get the same return, you've got to flood the airwaves. It's also difficult for customers to respond to. There's no link to click on a television ad, or there's no, if there's a phone number or something on the ad, the customer actually has to do additional work to remember the number or remember the URL and to find some time to do it, and then to purposefully put it in to a browser to connect with you. Or if it's like an ad for a store, they've got to go ahead and, for a physical store, they've got to, get in their car and go there. And it makes it hard for the customer has to do more work. And with very few exceptions, a lot of traditional media advertising is just not interesting enough to notice. There's so many limitations with what you can do, and a lot of ads just look like each other, and you don't have much of an opportunity to capture somebody's attention. And so, unless you're really, really creative about the way you do it, where you catch their eye with maybe something that's sensational or something that's colorful, it's just not interesting enough to notice. So let's turn now to digital media. So what does digital media offer us in comparison to the traditional media landscape? Well, first of all, new ways of presenting information. It's not just that you are showing people images and videos. There's actually a culture behind that gives you permission to present that information in more creative ways. So even if you're talking about an advertisement on a website or a video ad or an ad that you see in social media, you actually have more liberties and more creativity that you could put in that than you would in a traditional space. It's because both the technology enables you to do that, but also the culture of the space allows you to do that. It's less intrusive to a customer, even if it's more intrusive. The customer accepts that, actually. There's new ways of targeting customers. You can, because digital media in general is so disaggregated and so fragmented, and people can organize in groups of interest, then it's much easier to actually find out who they are. It's easier to track them. It's easier to insert advertising messages into the content in which they are consuming. Sometimes the content is actually embedded in the content. The advertising is embedded in the content that they're consuming. So it's a very creative space. Even as some of the types of advertising that straddle the line between traditional media and modern digital media. And I mentioned email before. I'm also going to put banner advertising on websites, which is kind of the web equivalent of the ad in the newspaper. Even those are, they're better, of course, than their traditional counterparts, but even those are finding limitations on their creativity. Digital media also offers us new ways of creating relationships with our customers. The old style of marketing is an us to many, or like a one to many relationship. It's not a two-way relationship, it's a one-way relationship. But what digital media allows us to do is to create two-way relationships, not just with one group of customers, but with multiple groups of customers, and sometimes even people who are not customers, but which conversations can create a brand message or create a excitement about your brand. So, and I'll get a little bit more into that later about what that exactly means. You also have new ways of tracking the journey. The software for marketing has become so sophisticated that you have the ability to follow your customer from the moment they express an interest in what you're offering. And so by using the software and tracking their journey, and especially if what you're selling is something that can be purchased online, you can actually mark the journey from the initial point of interest all the way to a sale. And of course, what that does in a way that traditional media can't do is that you can tie a purchase directly to a bit of marketing in the digital space in ways that you could never do before. And then, of course, what that leads to is new ways of capturing value. By creating relationships, by being in the spaces where your customers are, by getting a sense of what they're feeling and what's important to them, you start to be able to get valuable insight into what it is you're selling and how you can tailor it in better ways so that you can make it a pleasant experience for them to purchase from you, where they're excited to give you their money. And that's what digital media offers us. So let's look at digital media from the customer perspective, how they look at this space, because some of you might be thinking, like, that doesn't sound too different from traditional media. Like, if you're a customer, how are you looking at this space? Well, first of all, marketing can be entertainment. It can be entertainment in a way that traditional media can't be. Sure, a television ad can be entertaining. That's also a really expensive endeavor. But what you can do here is you can entertain in several ways. First of all, if you're doing video content, you can make that video content really, really engaging and interactive. But you can also do entertaining things with your marketing where you are speaking about their passions, where you are directly engaging, sponsoring content that they're interested in, whether it's a podcast or it's a video game or something like that. And you can be a part of that entertainment process with digital media. Also, customers appreciate, and I have to put a caveat here, appropriate personalization. When you create advertising that is so attuned to what the customer wants that they don't see it as intrusive, they actually see it as you doing them a favor. This is the ultimate kind of marketing you can get, and this is also what's possible with digital media. Now, I use the word appropriate because if you do this too much, it can be a little creepy. You're following them around the web. I mean, we've seen that sometimes, if you express an interest on a website for a particular type of product and you look at it but you don't buy and you're surfing the web, somehow you're seeing ads pop up for that very thing that you saw. And, personally, that can be annoying to me. But I see why people do that, because we have the ability to track that journey and to put little reminders in their head if they haven't purchased that product that they looked at, but, for some reason walked away from that purchase. The next is that brands can have a personality and a peer-to-peer relationship with people. And you see this most effectively done on Twitter, where the Twitter accounts of particular brands are run by really savvy social media people, and they have some liberties. They can be a little snarky and a little bit edgy. They can talk directly to people, and it makes people excited if you actually engage with the Twitter account of a product that you like and they respond to you in a very positive way or even a joking way. It really binds that customer to the brand. And this is the benefit of the two-way relationship that I was talking about. That two-way relationship isn't just about, customer service. It's about creating a community and stirring the pot of that community and making sure that you are at the center of that community. And this is what digital media can allow you to do. And what that results in is customer-centric experiences, that you are there to enhance the life of the customer, as opposed to the other way around, which is you're offering something for the customer and the customer is going to buy it regardless of whether it matches their world that they're in. It's like a one-size-fits-all thing. But what digital media allows you to do is it allows you to micro-market to particular groups of people and share with them the passion they have for whatever it is they're interested in. And it could be their community identity. It could be their regional identity. It could be, some kind of passion that they're interested in, whether it's a television show or a sports team or something like that. But you're going to where the customer is and you're getting involved at their level, not the other way around. And what does this do? This generates genuine passion in customers. When a customer is passionate about your product, that is the ultimate marketing. It's almost like no marketing. You don't have to do anything. You just allow your customers to be your ambassadors. You allow them to be passionate about it. You feed that passion by validating what they're doing and recognizing it and appreciating it, and it creates a feedback loop. Again, something only possible with digital media. Now, this is a huge transition. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges in making this transition. First of all, this just requires new skill sets to implement. Marketing today is not what marketing was like before. It does require you to have an open mind, to, lower yourself to the level of your customer. Don't stay in your ivory tower. To immerse yourself in your customer's experience. find out what drives them, find out what makes them tick, and not like some kind of cold research study, but actually being in the places where they are, spending quality time there. Now, these skills are so specialized that, well, it requires an investment in new technology. There are so many different tools out there that help you to track the customer journey, that help you to identify those customers, that help to insert your messaging into where they are, into the places where they are. There's some very sophisticated software and tools out there to do all of this. And that's going to require some investments. In many cases, it's not cheap. And in the digital environment, you'll find that customers are increasingly savvy. In the traditional space, customers are simply objects upon which your marketing acts. But in the digital space, customers can interact with you, they can avoid you, they can make fun of you, they can support you, and they have been in the digital space long enough to know what's real and what's not real. A lot of them have been cheated before, and because you're so close to the customer, they've developed a little bit of a thick skin sometimes, and you need to design around them. They're not willing to be manipulated, even as they're willing to be passionate ambassadors of your brand. If you do it wrong, they will be your enemy. And the worst thing you want to have is a group of customers out there that are saying bad things about you and spreading that word and essentially doing anti-marketing for your company. This requires the old mindsets in the company to change. And there are plenty of people out there who think that things like TikTok and other kinds of social media are frivolous. They're cheap. They're young. They're inconsequential. But it's just not the case anymore. And it really doesn't matter what you're selling. Everyone that you might be targeting and the people around those people that you might be targeting are all in these spaces, and you can't ignore it anymore. And that means if you're not in these spaces, you're invisible. And if you're invisible, and then if you're noticed as being invisible, you're going to be called a dinosaur. And once you're called a dinosaur, that reflects on the services that you sell, the products that you sell, and it reflects on all of that. And people want what's new and exciting and relevant. And even if you're an old school type of service or product, if your marketing is cutting edge, it will reflect on your product. So this requires a real change in the attitude within a company. And then this is both a good and a bad thing. You might have to restructure your product to fit, because once you are in these spaces and you're side by side with your customers and you're listening to what they say and they're being really blunt and honest with you, you may actually realize that your product or service needs to pivot a little bit, needs to change a little bit, because it's not completely aligned with these customers. And the most passionate customers, maybe they have a bone to pick about something that you build or something that you serve. And it's actually it's an opportunity to embrace. Okay, well, let's take that and let's tell the customer, we heard what you had to say. You've helped us to make a better product. Here it is. You'll find that those people who are critics will turn into ambassadors overnight. So how do we embrace digital marketing? Well, the first thing that I recommend is that you restructure your marketing teams by specialty. The days of the one person who's doing everything from doing the creative copy to the publishing, to the implementation, to the follow-up, those days are gone. You need to create really aggressively creative teams to create content, and you need to create teams of people that are monitoring and maintaining those customer relationships in digital spaces. You need to create a really stellar team of people who track and market all of the metrics that are coming in and tracking that customer journey all the way to a purchase. And then you need people who can optimize that whole experience. Find out what's working, invest more in those. Find out what's not working, dial back on that. Try to figure out where the trends are going. Where are people migrating from one medium to another? Are people migrating from one type of content to another? And if you get all those specialty teams working together, you will really have a well-oiled machine. This requires at least one of those teams to aggressively find the spaces where the customer lives. There is no customer group out there that isn't somewhere aggregated in the online space. Maybe they're reading a particular online publication. Maybe they've created community interest groups. Maybe they are watching a certain type of YouTube channel. But find out where those customers live and insert yourself directly in there. How do you do that? You either aggressively advertise in those spaces, or you can even do deals with those content producers, sponsor podcasts, sponsor YouTube channels. There's different ways to be a part of that experience. And if they see you being a part of that experience, then they will think highly of what you're doing. And this is also part of being a part of the customer conversations. When people are out there talking about the space that your company is in, and they're saying, I wish we had this, or I really hate it when a company does this, or here's what's wrong with these kinds of products, or maybe they're doing ratings and reviews of products, including your own. Be a part of those conversations. I have found in my marketing journey, when people say really bad things about, I have this app, I have an app that is a global app, nearly 1 million downloads, and I see people saying bad things about it all the time. But when I actually insert myself into that conversation, I say, something like, hey, you're right, and that's a really good idea, and we're going to take that idea and we're going to try to put it in. Would that solve the problem for you? Their attitude changes overnight, and they go from being an intense critic to someone who wants to beta test your new app. So it's really, really easy to win them over if you just show them that respect. You're not talking down to them. You're actually at the same level as them. You respect what they're saying. You never get upset. You need to do a deep dive into marketing software. This is an area where even I, as much as I've looked into these things, I've barely scratched the surface of what marketing software can do. It changes every day. There are old school programs that do really well. There are new programs that don't. You need to find the difference between them. You need to get the right mix. You need to find the right CRM software. You need to find the right tracking software, the right implementation software. It's a lot more than I can go over in this presentation, but you need to do a deep dive into that software. And the last thing that I think you should keep in mind with respect to digital marketing is chase every long tail. What is the long tail? The long tail is that small group of people who are extremely passionate about a particular thing. And it could be that they're in a particular community group or they have a particular hobby, but these are passionate people. And if you win over passionate people, they become the engine that pulls your train. And if you can get, embedded with as many of these long tails as possible, they will be a powerful force in your marketing arsenal. So what does this mean for your digital marketing future? Let's put it all together. So first of all, you can do more with less if you've got the right software. The software is meant to do the hard kind of, grueling work of the numbers, because you need to focus more of your time on the content creation and the relationship building. Let the software do all that hard number crunching work. Become a trusted friend of your customer. Be at their level. Respond to them. Don't ignore them. Talk to them, not down to them. Be with them, and acknowledge when you've done something wrong, and pledge to make up for it. You'll find that they'll be very forgiving. Capture trends in your market before others. If you're in these spaces, you can start figuring out which way things are going, and you'll know, chances are, before 90% of your competitors. This allows you also to pivot and iterate your campaigns instantly. You can very quickly see what's working and what's not, and then you can experiment. Do A/B testing. Try to do 3 versions of an ad, see which one works better, then invest in the one that's working the best. But you can just constantly refresh and change. It also makes things more interesting for your customers. And the end result of all this, if you do it right, marketing becomes a joy, not a chore, because you're actually having fun in places where people are having fun, and you're a part of a larger community with your customers. And if you're doing it right, it becomes a joy. So thank you very much for hearing me out. If you've got any questions or comments, you can find me at @Shahed on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I'm happy to continue this conversation with you. Thank you very much.